Hi, everybody. My name is Bevan Riley, co-founder and principal at Sweetbriar. And thanks for everybody for joining today. Today we're going to be talking about drive adoption and dramatically increasing your ROI. So today I've joined here from Matt Worsta from Worsta and Josh Wold from West Liberty Foods, whose store we're going to be actually showcasing today. So I just wanted to give everybody a little bit of background. Sweetbriar is a Google Cloud premier partner. Our primary focus is around G Suite and Google Cloud Platform. Our real goal is about helping our clients get the most out of their investment in the Google Cloud. And what we try to do is, differentiate ourselves in the ecosystem by really trying to concentrate around change management and training and business process improvement. We've really helped, hundreds of companies move over to the Google Cloud. Some of those companies like Reddit, Century 21 of Canada, and most importantly today, West Liberty Foods. We'll kind of talk in a little bit more in detail. So the thing that is kind of a common thing that we come across is really resistance to change. A lot of people are stuck in their ways. So it's really important to cater a change management and training plan that's going to foster adoption. And this is really where business innovation services come into play. So what is business innovation services? It's a structured, measurable, incremental approach to shifting your business processes to the cloud. So kind of step one in this is really understanding the company, their goals, their structure. And then from there, it's about conducting interviews with the different employees to really understand their business processes, their workflows, how they're really collaborating. And then when you take all that data, analyze that data and try to derive a plan that's going to push drivable, measurable value around the processes. And then it's actually implementing that plan, right? So this customized, tailored, change management plan. The reason why we feel this is so important is that we believe this is a critical factor to a successful project. If you just go into Drive or just the cloud in general and just dump the data in there and sprinkle in some training webinars, it's not going to be a recipe for success. But if you actually tailor a change management plan that's specifically geared around people's business processes, utilizing the Google tools to simplify their lives, you're going to see a dramatic increase in productivity. So luckily today, we have West Liberty Foods who actually went through this process. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background on their company. So they've been a client with ours for over 3 years now. They have about 1,200 employees across multiple locations in the US. Our first engagement with West Liberty Food was actually moving their Exchange server over to G Suite, specifically Gmail and Calendar. After that successful project, it was deemed that, hey, phase 2, we need to start moving our file server to Google Drive. And through a lot of different conversations, it was kind of a common thing that what we need to do was to standardize business processes across all these multiple locations. And the whole goal behind this was to increase productivity, which is going to be increasing yield and therefore profits. Because West Liberty Foods, they're actually a food manufacturing company, so they actually produce all the turkey meat for Subway. So if we're able to increase the yield, you're going to see dramatic increase in profits. So kind of a little bit of a project overview here is we knew that this project was going to be resource intensive. We were going to need multiple people across multiple locations for months at a time to conduct these interviews and really get this process going. And our commitment to our clients is really to provide the best resources in the industry, to execute a plan for people's success. So Matt and I have actually been working in the Google ecosystem for over 8 years, have a lot of successful projects underneath our belt. So we had a trust factor here that I knew that they could execute this plan and really take West Liberty Foods to the next level. So what I'd like to do now is introduce Matt, who's going to talk a little bit more about the methodology today.
Thanks, Bevan. Check. Can you guys hear me? Now we're good? There we go. I can hear it now. Cool. So it's really great to have you guys here, and thank you, Bevan, for the introduction. Just a quick intro on Worsta. So Worsta is also a cloud partner. We actually do things a little bit differently, though. First of all, we focus our energy on the post-deployment phase, or after you've already gone to Google. So one of the things that we're really, really hyper-focused on is being able to look at business processes or look at the things that your business is doing and help you make the most of the technology to actually move that stuff forward, right? It's business innovation as a service, literally. And the second thing that we do is we are partner agnostic. So regardless of who your G Suite partner may be today, we work across the partner ecosystem with as many partners as we can to go out and make sure that the customer experience is better. If everyone out there using G Suite's business processes improve, then we've done our job well, and it doesn't matter who you work with. So much so, in fact, one of our first principles is win-win is always better, and you can see that with our collaboration with Sweetbriar. Sweetbriar is one of our best partners. As Bevan said, we've known each other for quite a while. And when we look to the customer base that Sweetbriar has, we really are looking to find people like Josh, who's leaning into the future and saying, you know what, we do want to change our manufacturing process for the better with tech. We do want to make sure that our accounting department uses Google Sheets. We're going to get to that one in a minute. So that's a little bit about what makes us different, but you've probably heard a lot of this stuff and innovation and process improvement and stuff for the last couple of days. So let's take this slew of buzzwords and make it into something. Really quick, before we get started though, I do want to ask, how many folks, quick show of hands, are G Suite customers today? Awesome. And how many folks are doing their homework? They're here doing some research, trying to figure out if this makes sense for their business. Okay, awesome. So a mixed bag, which is excellent. That's actually really important. So we're going to talk a little bit about the methodology. For those of you doing your research, what might be really interesting or really important here on the right, which I just realized is actually not easy to see, is the process that we expect, or the life cycle that we expect every customer to go through, right? So as part of that life cycle, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to get G Suite, right? They're going to move their platforms. They're going to move their email. They may move their documents. But all of these follow-on things, this business process discovery and analysis, these are the things that we would expect to really help align your business and actually increase your ROI. Fundamentally, there are only a few component parts of the actual business process improvement sprints, right? You're going to do your discovery and analysis, you're going to document and review what you find, and then you're going to conduct some kind of internal change management to actually make those changes. What we wanted to do today was actually give you some opportunities to take away things. Did that work? To take away things that you could actually use in an internal sprint that you're having today that are actionable and measurable. The first is whenever we do our discovery process, we actually do interviews with each department, but we don't bring the departments together as a group. So quick question, how many people have been in a meeting with their boss and they've said, I really, really hate submitting the report every Friday that you make me do, and it's not worth anything. Nobody's going to do that, right? And so what we found is when we get people together in a group and we sit down with the supervisor and the manager and the clerk, and everybody sits together and tries to ideate and figure out what's wrong with the business, no one says anything. And then the vice president's like, I think we should do this thing over here, and all of a sudden, everybody's like, yeah, that's such a great idea, we should do that. The truth of the matter is we sit down and we focus on the role. Because if you talk to a clerk, the clerk has very specific things that they do all day that they might be frustrated with or they might think could be done better. And because they're so close to the information, they're better positioned to actually give you a good recommendation than the manager or the supervisor or the vice president. The same goes all the way up and down the chain, and the net result of having these specific focused meetings is that you get a picture of everything that the department may do end to end, but from each person's perspective. Does that make sense to everyone? Cool. The second thing is focus on the value driven and the outcomes. Don't focus on the technology. So many customers have come up to us and they said, but we can't get off Microsoft Excel because it doesn't work that way. We have these macros and we have spreadsheets and it's not going to be a thing. That might be true. But the reality of the question isn't whether or not the waterfall that finance is using is able to be moved directly over to Google Sheets. The question is, can you remake that business process so that it uses the advantages that Google Sheets comes with? Real-time collaboration, real-time data, availability everywhere, right? And looking at the process differently and not trying to sledgehammer in the nail is actually one of the fundamental keystones of making the process better. Finally, when you're working with those users, you have to make sure that they understand the business driver for change. So a good example of this is at West Liberty Foods. On the production side, the production supervisors actually have to submit paperwork for time off. It's pretty standard, right? Everybody does that. If you have time off, you have to submit some form or you have to fill out something on the internet. Well, by moving that process into the cloud, what the team there didn't necessarily realize is the net impact that it was going to have on the HR team, who all day long is sifting through these processes, these requests, and making sure that the person hasn't had 53 days off this last 2 months and isn't calling in sick every other day, right? So being very descriptive and very programmatic about saying to those teams during the change management process, here's why this is happening, is usually really, really helpful in fostering the innovation at the team level, at the individual level. And the last thing is, one thing that we found when we went through this process, and again, specifically with West Liberty, I think Josh is going to tell you about this later, is that users want to do better. Your users, your user population want to make the business better. They want to feel impactful, right? This is a trend, and it's been talked about quite often. People are trying to make their jobs and their lives more meaningful and better. And once you start enabling those people, it's going to keep going. So encourage, encourage, encourage. Make sure they know where it is that they can go to make another suggestion after the sprint's over, or if they see something else that can be improved and they've learned from the tech. That's really important in fostering that culture of innovation for long-term growth. So for us, when we talk about this business innovation sprint, really one of the things that's important is the outcome, right? What do we end up delivering? What happens at the end of this sprint? We call it a business innovation report. And it's actually a narrative about the business. What comes out of this is a document that, in the case of West Liberty Foods, is well over 100 pages and had well over 150 different things that we found that are business processes that could be improved, right? By listening to each of the departments, or even just one department, you can hear duplications across different sites. You can hear that there's one process that's done with, let's say Google Forms at a single plant, and then at a different location, they're using paper forms for the same thing. And you can merge those together into one more efficient activity. And so you have this narrative around each department that's actually associated with the people that you've talked to and the role-specific actions that you've heard. And you can take that back to the executive management team and you can say, look, here's the things that are happening in our business and here's how we can make them better with technology. Secondly, it includes a process listening and an improvement ranking system. We call it TII. What we've done is we've shied a little bit away from the traditional ROI, because ROI is hard to measure until you actually make the change. If you go in and make the change, you could do a time study, or you could look at the differences in production and yield. But if you list these things around the different categories of impact that they have, for example, data availability, or a reduction in human error, or a hard cost reduction, I mean, you might be able to get rid of some software, then what you can do is you can actually plot and graph these things, and you can say, here are the items, the top 30 items that I have for impact in human error reduction, or the top 40 items that I have for a software cost reduction. And then you can make business changes, you can make business decisions about what it is that you want to attack or address first in your change management plan. So that's a significant part of the document. And then finally, you end up with change management recommendations. How do you actually make this change in real life? This part's actually really important because for those of you guys who were on G Suite, how many had Drive training as part of your rollout? Like webinars and stuff like that? Couple hands? Okay. One thing that we often find is that the training and change management recommendation is go to a webinar, see how Google Sheets works, everything will be great. And the challenge with that is you're going to end up in a situation where your end user is having to make decisions about the business on their own. Sometimes they don't feel empowered. Sometimes they just don't feel like changing, right? Excel's easier to open, and they're going to use Google Sheets. So with the change management recommendations, what we're actually saying are things like the department, the HR department's time off policy used to be this, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to create this system, and we're going to go out and we're going to accompany it with a new handout, and we're going to actually work through with that team how to use the new system and make sure that it's in place, and then check back a week later and make sure that they're using it, but also seeing the value, right? Seeing the reporting or the things that come with it. Much more detailed, much more actionable, and because it's based on actual data from the individual people in the organization, it's a lot easier to go to the management team and say, hey, this is going to work. Let me tell you how. Let me show you why. So speaking of Google Drive training, and frankly, we need to get to the results. We need to get the fun part here. Of the folks on G Suite, how many of you have an accounting department that fully uses Google Sheets and not Excel? How many of you have an accounting department that does not do that? Everybody, right? This is a really good point. Accounting and finance are just really the people that are interesting. They have these really heavy use cases around Microsoft Excel and macros and all that stuff. What we were able to do, the way that this actually ended up playing out, is when we sat down with the accounting departments at West Liberty Foods across the multiple locations, they have this huge load. They have a ton of things that they have to get done. Some of it is taking information from the ERP. Some of it is taking information from the inventory systems, mashing it all together and pulling together these reports or these different processes that they have to then disseminate. Here's your version, Bolingbrook. Here's your inventory data. And West Liberty proper, the plant in Iowa, here's your data, and here's your weekly attainment, and here's your productivity, right? Well, everybody here that has looked at Google Sheets knows that having real-time data available is going to make that system better, right? You're able to pull the spreadsheets in, you're able to actually make a report automatically, and you're able to send it out. But getting from a webinar about Google Sheets to actually doing that thing is a leap and bound that most, I won't say none, most accounting users are not going to be able to make, right? So part of the process here is we actually sat down with the accounting teams and we said, look, let's take some of that data in. Let's look at that process that you have and we will recreate it with you. We will sit down, we'll have a small workshop. We will turn this into a collection of sheets for the production side of the house on the accounting side that actually takes the data in automatically, and then it produces the reports that you need for Bolingbrook or for West Liberty or for Tremont in Utah, and it just updates them automatically. So what ended up happening, or what the actual result was from from an end user standpoint, is that team saving 20 hours a month because they don't have to take these spreadsheets from Excel from all over the place and format them and cut them apart, paste them here, email them out. And the implied benefit is, in fact, that now the departments or the different teams at the different locations actually get data faster because they don't have to worry about the couple hours that it takes for them to process that data and bring it back together. It's a hard example of time actually saved as part of the process and going through and really digging in with a particular department. You guys feeling okay about it? Cool. So let's look at another one. Another thing that we often hear about G Suite adoption is that we have all these custom tools, and there's no chance that we could ever move these tools because they're built into our ERP or ERM, and we use them every day, right? It's a known thing. What we found with West Liberty is they have a well-known, it's called QAD, it's a well-known ERM or ERP that actually manages the manufacturing process, right? They're a full-sale manufacturer. By the way, if you guys have not, or we didn't hear earlier, if you've ever eaten a Subway sandwich, you know Josh. So you guys should congratulate them for making a heck of a good sandwich. The inventory and the changes that happen all throughout the day, all throughout the entire manufacturing process, are uploaded into QAD via Excel spreadsheets in this process called SIM. And what SIM does is it basically takes all the data that comes off of the machines on the floor, all their automated SCADA and factory inputs, and it formats them properly and then puts them into the data store, right? Huge roadblock when we first went through and did our Google migration because it was like, well, everybody uses SIM and no one can get off it because then 6 hours after we get off it, the whole production process stops because we run out of meat. What we were able to do as an example of a little bit of a more in-depth change, right? So the first change was really just using Google Sheets. Here, we worked with teams throughout the organization to create an add-on that did the SIM process. Total time investment was something like 20 or 25 hours of work with a developer. But the net result is we went from department to department, and we could identify who the people were who needed SIM training, who needed to know how to SIM things from their sheets. And we allowed them to use the new SIM tool and just take that data and directly put it into the cloud, put it into their QAD system. In addition to the time savings over an hour a day per person that does this, is the actual added benefit is that the data is updated in real time. So they're not passing spreadsheets around anymore. And do I have the most up-to-date version, right? So it's a theme that you've heard before with G Suite, but it's something that in reality is actually quite solvable now, right? And you can actually build these add-ons and interface with really, really specific and custom systems. So how many folks here are thinking, great, man, you can save time, but who cares about that? No one? I had a CFO, I'm going to tell a quick story. I had a CFO sit me down one time and he said, "This is awesome, Matt, thank you. What do you want me to do? Send them home after their 3 hours are saved?" It doesn't really save me any money. This is just time savings. And of course I can say things like, sure, have them work on something else that's high value for your business, right? But at the end of the day, he's not wrong. That's a legitimate thing. And one of the cornerstones of what we are trying to do is really help you as an IT leader drive business value, not just add tools to the ecosystem, not just add tools to your user, right? There it is. So the final one we wanted to call out is actually, this came up as part of our discovery process, and it is an example of a very hard, measurable savings that came from this process. In the production process, when you're creating a lunch meat, you actually have to move the product from one part of the plant to the next. The plants are huge. These things are monstrous. And when you do that, you actually have to use racks. So it comes off the production slice line, it goes onto a rack, and we move things on the rack to the packaging or the shipping side of the house. And there are different types of racks for different types of meat. So if you get salami, you go on one rack, and if you're bologna, you go on another, for example. Well, as part of the overall production process, one of the things that was happening is the scheduling team didn't know where the racks were because the rack data wasn't surfaced properly from QAD or from their ERM, right? So we thought long and hard about how to actually fix this, and we basically ended up with a concoction, if you will, of QAD exports, Google Drive and spreadsheet plans for the schedulers, and that Google App Engine to actually help replan and make all these things available from a data perspective. So now, and I put this on there as future because it's in production rollout now, we're working towards this. A particular plant can lose between $8,000 and $30,000 in a given month due to rack shortages. I cut a bunch of meat, and now I can't do anything with it. It has to stay at the end of that particular section because I can't move it to the next. Well, with this IT solution, you can go back to the business, and Josh is going back to the business and saying, hey guys, if we put this in place, we can reduce all of the rack slowdowns that come across the production lines of the 4 facilities that we have. And as a literal result, attainment goes up, yield goes up, our ability to produce meat in a given calendar week goes up. That's a business outcome that it's very hard to argue with, right? We did this, we don't have a stoppage on the line, now we're able to create more meat. In addition, fun fact, second shift doesn't have to work the weekend either. A lot of times what would happen is they would have to come back in on a Saturday or a Sunday to make sure that they could make up for the production week. Because at the end of the day, and the week of the Super Bowl, Subway needs meat. They don't care whether or not the racks were there. So all this is kind of like me going through the process as the partner and as the person who's executed it. But the reality is, you guys want to hear from Josh. He's the guy who had to live through it. He's the guy who had to go through this entire process. I'm going to hand it over to him. He's going to talk about what West Liberty's Foods experience actually was as part of this whole endeavor.
Thank you. I'm Josh Wold. I'm the Director of IT at West Liberty Foods. I showed up and joined in the middle of this process between Gmail and the BIS rollout. And what I learned was that our company, initially when we rolled out Gmail, didn't do it in a way that was beneficial for our folks, in that they didn't tell them it was coming really, and then when they move over from Outlook to Gmail or whatever, they had a hard time making the transition. So we learned a valuable lesson there, and when we went over to the BIS part of this, we were able to make it a lot better because we had collaboration, but it was all over email. Everything that happened was over email. If somebody had a Excel, Word, or PowerPoint that they were updating in a team fashion, everybody's asking for the latest one. When they all wanted to work on one in a network drive, it was always locked. These are the typical issues that you have in there. And our end users were set in their ways. When we talk about functional parity, we're talking about, yes, Sheets can do almost everything Excel can do, and Word can, and Docs can do almost everything that Word can do, but the buttons aren't in the right places, right? People don't necessarily think about how or why they're doing something. They just know if I click this and then I click this, it works, and it's worked that way for me for the last 10 years, and who hid my cheese, right? So the culture was difficult to change, but as we found with Google that boasts that all their education, their Chrome for Education, most of the new hires that we have coming in from college or universities are all up to speed on this. They're ready to go. And a lot of and as he pointed out, a lot of our business applications are built assuming the use of Office. SIM was a great example of that, where we were told it can't be done. Well, with a little effort, we worked through it. But there's a number of areas that we have to do that still. And we're taking it that approach that they talked about earlier, that we're taking our time moving those processes off. Accounting is especially difficult. They have add-ons for Excel for certain things. Interestingly enough, our R&D department have special add-ons for PowerPoint to put together their training slides and things. So it's just things that we have to work through. So I want to talk a little bit about the Business Innovations Report. They spent a good amount of time speaking with each one of our teams, getting down to the root level detail of some of our business processes, and they documented everything. It was absolutely amazing. When I read through the Business Innovation Report, I'm relatively new to the West Liberty food space, but I learned a lot about our business that I didn't have to go and do interviews for to all the executives. But that simply helped us to understand what takes precedence, what's the most important to reach out and get done first. And it proves that they understand the business, right? So it proves that they took the time to not just wedge in some product and get us moved over, where basically you just do a drive transfer, right? You take your network drives and you dump them in a drive and you're good to go. See you later, pal. That isn't how it works. They cared enough to look through and say, okay, these are your business processes. When we move this is what's going to be affected, and this is how we can resolve those with technology or training or whatever it is. So we had a unique situation. We needed an accelerated timeline for moving from the Office suite to the G Suite. So we took what, a 6 or 8 month process and whittled it down to 2 or 3. Yeah, 3 months. Ultimately, what that helped us do is give us a first year savings for our Office licensing, well over $100, if not $150,000. So first year, right off the bat, we saved that money. So we didn't have a lot of time to slow roll the training. So what these guys ended up doing was sending out teams of people to each one of our plants, and for 1 week solid, they set up training events for everybody to come into a room. This is what's happening. This is how it's happening. These are how these tools work. They also did a number of one-on-one sessions. They were absolutely amazing. That on-site help is very beneficial, because you know how it is sitting at your desk looking at a video and watching a training. You're working. You're not looking at the training. You're not watching it. You're not understanding what's going on. But when you go sit in a room and you're able to ask somebody face to face what's going on or how to do this, and they can answer it, it's pretty exceptional. So our logic was to keep a small quantity of Office licenses around for folks, for specifically for business processes that couldn't easily be moved off into the G Suite within that time frame. So we kept around a few, but ours is a bit unique in that case. I think most of you should take the time to do the whole, 8 months or 10 months or whatever it is. So training is the most important thing. Getting people to understand, instead of I click this and I do this and then it spits out this thing and that's what my boss wants. But what are you driving at, right? Why are you clicking these buttons? What does it do to the data? To get people to understand that, then they can take that knowledge and utilize it more effectively in G Suite and maybe come up with even better ways to do their work. And the cool part about that in particular is that once we showed them, hey, did you know you can do X, Y, and Z? They're like, oh, really? Oh, I can use this over here and do it in this area and save myself so much time. I know just some of the formulas that I've been able to show people, which exist in Excel, but for some reason going over to G Suite, they didn't put 2 and 2 together, that you could filter and sort your results off another page. Since it's new, it makes them think of it in new ways, and I think that's a great driver. We've had some people asking us for more, wanting to write add-ons or do App Maker to build out business processes. I know we've used Google Sites for a number of our business processes, and those weren't spawned by anything we did. Those were those users coming to us and saying, hey, what else can I do with this? And that's been great for us. So we're, turning the ship in a new direction, obviously. Since this, we are starting this cloud-first mentality where we're going to try to do everything in this. We're not going to have any platforms on-prem. We're not going to spin up any new projects in-house in our data center. We're going to spin them up either in the suite or with the GCE. So with that, I think I'm ready to hand it back. You guys got?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Nice work.
Thanks, Josh. It's nothing better than actually hearing from the client, and thanks for painting such a great picture. I want to kind of just recap a little bit and kind of go through this very quickly because I would like to leave some time for Q&A. Really the main objective here is about moving to the cloud can be easy, but you have to put together a proper change management and training plan. It's just a key component to success. And if you're able to really want to stacking the deck in your favor, it's really important to audit those processes around those improvements. And these long-term benefits are going to be very significant. Increased productivity, increased revenue. Then we can conclude. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks.